So we set like a high level objective for the company, and then each department has their own objectives, teams, and then individuals. And a lot of those objectives are kind of cross reliant. And so it forces the team members to rely on each other for help, but also to contribute help to other team members. And I think that was like setting those OKRs. It is very intensive. It's something that we do every quarter. It takes a lot of time and thought, and then strategizing like, what are the key results? What's really important that we need to be focusing on? And there's a lot, right? There's a lot I think founders always really want to pursue, making sure that you're not necessarily going after shiny things, but understanding like, does this tie into the OKRs? And that's kind of that goes into the decision-making process for what we work on and what we decide to kind of put into the backlog.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My name is Joao Camargo, and my guest here today is Amantha Bagdon, who is the CEO and founder of RxPost. Amantha, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be on.
I'm excited to have this conversation. It's a little bit of a different company than the ones that I've been speaking with recently. So, Amantha, why don't you tell everyone that's listening in a little bit more about RxPost, who you are, who you help, and any other context that you'd like to share about the business?
Yeah. So I am a pharmacy technician by background. I've been a pharmacy tech for 20 years. And I started RxPost because when I was working in pharmacy, I saw that there was a lot of waste with drug inventory expiring. And the independent pharmacy that I worked at would actually work with other local pharmacies to help alleviate some of this waste. And so I created RxPost as a marketplace that connects more pharmacies and makes it really easy for them to buy and sell their perfectly good in-date surplus medications to one another.
That's awesome. One, because I think that's a part of, I call it business, that people don't even realize actually happens, except if you're the pharmacist going through it, right? It's a huge issue that is, as you said, concurrent and can take away a lot of the efficacy of the business and the operations and everything else. So tell me a little bit more about how you guys help them and how that entire backend, you don't have to give me 3 hours of conversation here, but how that entire backend works.
Yeah, so I would say like imagine a pharmacy, and it's just like any other retail business. They have to purchase those medications, and like we had special ordered a medication, a cancer drug that was like $5,000, and the patient ended up canceling the medication. We got stuck with it, so it was my job as the pharmacy technician to then call around to other local pharmacies to see if maybe they might have a patient that's on the medication. And if we were lucky enough to find a pharmacy that was going to use the medication, it was then my job to coordinate delivery to that store, which often looked like me jumping into my car during my lunch break to drive it over. And most importantly, how do we get paid for that medication? Because there's no button on the cash register that helps you do that. And it was just writing on a piece of paper, like Elliot's Pharmacy, $5,000, and you tape it to the wall. I always thought, man, if this piece of paper falls off the wall and disappears underneath the abyss of the refrigerator, never to be seen again, there's no accounting for it. So we created a marketplace where we verify all the pharmacy customers, brick and mortar businesses. They have to be in good standing with several federal and state agencies, and they just scan the bottle and it's posted online. We facilitate the sale and the money transaction and provide the shipping label, and it goes directly from pharmacy A to pharmacy B. And we take 10% of that cost. So we're really aligned with our customers. We only make money if they're making money.
Yeah, that's awesome. One, because it really creates a true partnership there, right there. It's not just you providing something and then they have to hope for the best. It's like, no. If you succeed, then that's how we succeed as well. And it gives you even extra incentive to make them succeed even better, which is also always awesome. One thing that I wanted to highlight too, which we'll dive into a little bit later in the conversation, is the methodology that you guys also reach out to these pharmacies, which from our first conversation was so exciting to hear. And we'll dive into that. But before we even speak about that, I also wanted to understand the awareness that a lot of these pharmacists might have about that situation. Do you think it's more often a situation in which they know this is an issue, they just don't really know how to solve it, so they just keep dealing with it, or they've tried so many different solutions, but they're never able to actually find a way to get rid of this problem?
Well, a lot of independent pharmacies, which is where we particularly focus on, these pharmacists and owners, they went to pharmacy school to help patients. They didn't necessarily, they kind of fell into business operations. It's kind of similar to how I fell
Yeah.
into being a founder because I wanted to help people. And so inventory management isn't necessarily at the top of the list. So even the pharmacy technicians that come to work in this
Mhm.
crisis, business operations isn't at the top of the list. And so having worked in pharmacy for so long, I understood that the solution going into the pharmacy really needs to fit into the existing workflow. Like innovation only happens if innovation only happens if you understand the workflow and there's adoption at that level.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's so awesome. And I love to hear, thank you for sharing that as well. And I love to hear the story for people as well, because oftentimes it's like, oh man, I'm dealing with this thing that I absolutely despise. There must be a better way, like the typical entrepreneurial journey. And so thank you for sharing yours there as well. Let's dive into that thing that I mentioned of how you guys are reaching out to people, because you said to me, I believe, I'll butcher exactly what you said, but it was something like along the lines of, I believe no company that we've spoken with does marketing in the way that I do, and does it very effectively in the way that I do. So I would love for you to share with everyone here that methodology, which some people might think not even doesn't even exist anymore. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess this really ties back into understanding workflow and having worked in the environment and being my own target audience is pharmacies
Yeah.
still use fax machines. So the way that we reach our audience and like our prospects and our leads is through fax marketing. We do faxes out to the pharmacies, and we actually had a pharmacy who received a fax and we had never corresponded with this person with a phone call or an in person visit, and just a 2 cent fax. They saw how much money we could save them and their pharmacy. They went to the website, they self onboarded, and they completed their first purchase in 12 minutes flat, which I think is it's a major win for us to know that it is that simple, that we've made it super easy for people to achieve the thing that they need to do.
That's so cool, so cool, and so fast as well. I'm sure everybody listening is like, "Oh man, if I could get every single customer in just 12 minutes like that, that would be phenomenal." And you just piqued the curiosity in me here. Is that, and this is, if this is something that you don't want to share, then of course, please just let me know. But is there an average amount that you guys can, I guess, calculate in a way of like, hey, this is kind of how much you would be able to save by just by using this thing that we provide?
Yeah, so the average pharmacy will lose about $200,000 a year on expired inventory. And that's just like your typical retail pharmacy. Your chains, I think, per store tend to be a little bit higher because they're not necessarily
Mm,
focused on inventory optimization either. And then health systems and hospitals, those drug costs are significantly higher and harder to
yeah.
track because they're going to patient rooms and they're a lot more unit
Mhm.
dose focused. But yeah, $200,000 on average is what a pharmacy will lose on expired inventory. And we're
Mhm.
helping pharmacies recoup up to $50,000 to $70,000 for certain stores because,
Yeah.
certain things happen. They have a primary care provider that they worked very closely with who, like is no longer practicing,
Mhm,
has retired, and now they don't know what to do
mhm.
with all these medications. Or January 1st happens, right? Everyone gets new insurance and none of the medications are covered anymore, or everything needs a prior
Yeah,
auth,
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
or the new drug comes to market, right? And then the doctors are all being pushed by the sales reps to prescribe something new. And so all the stuff that the pharmacy has on their shelf, which, like there is this mentality in pharmacy that you want to have, a lot of stuff on the shelf at any given time for just in case that patient walks in and needs it.
Sure.
No one wants to tell a patient, we don't have it in stock, we can't get it, right? Go somewhere else. That's
Mhm.
not great customer service.
Thank you for sharing that as well. And I think it's so important too, because everybody wants to be ready, right? But that readiness could have that huge cost on the back end. And man, if you tell, yeah, I can assume that if you just tell any business, hey, maybe you'll be saving around 50K a year just by doing this very easy thing, you should probably do that. Oh man, everybody would be jumping at that opportunity. So that's really, really awesome. However, in this podcast, a trend or a theme that I always like to show is that business is not just sunshines and rainbows. Even though there are major wins and that can be phenomenal, there are many hurdles to get to those wins. And from someone looking from the outside, it can look phenomenal. Hey, this is amazing. This business here is doing $20 million and all these great things. And actually, this just reminded me. I had an ex Microsoft employee here, and he was mentioning that even when they were absolutely crushing it, killing it from everybody, they still are. But I'm saying early 2000s here, everything looked phenomenal. And then he was telling me that from the inside, oh man, it was just fires all over the place, and like nobody knows unless they're actually part of it. So one thing that I always like to highlight is yes, there are major wins that happen in business, but there are also many challenges. Tell me about some of those challenges that stand in the way of achieving some of the goals for the company as well.
I mean, right now we have a really amazing team. I think
Mm.
I talked to a lot of founders right before and right after closing my pre-seed round, and a lot of the advice I had received was around really focusing on company culture. And so I took that to
Mm.
task, and I have probably the best team that anyone could ask for. Sometimes I feel like they don't need me enough, which is great, right? As a founder, that gives me the time I need to plan out the next 5 year strategy. But I will share like some of the difficulties from earlier on because I'd bootstrap this. I'm not from a traditional startup background. I just knew that I wanted to help the pharmacies that I work with, and I was driving pharmacy to pharmacy, telling them about RxPost and getting them signed up, helping them load their inventory for about 3 years before I got
Mhm.
introduced to the wonderful world of venture and entrepreneurship and the amazing LA ecosystem that we have here. I was down to like
Yeah.
$2,000 left in my bank. And this was like after I had exhausted all my credit card lines and I was just like on the verge of closing up shop. And I just had one amazing
Mm.
investor who had conviction and said, like, I'm going to come in and do this check. Even if there's not enough money in the fund, I will personally write you this check. And I think like it's those little
Mm.
validation points that really happen along the way that are super
Mm.
encouraging. And it's really important, I think, to talk about, like you mentioned, not just the wins, but it's a long, hard, grueling road. I fully anticipate that there are going to be more hurdles in the future coming
Yeah.
up. Some that are foreseeable and some that are not.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that as well. It's a roller coaster. Sometimes of emotions. Sometimes it's a roller coaster of doing the hard work itself and those 14, 16 hour days that in the moment seem like a loss, right? They can sometimes seem, and this might be just me sharing my feelings here, but sometimes they can feel like there's nothing actually going towards us. But then there's this a quote that I love, which is all work works. It either works on you or it works for you. So if it's not working for you, the results aren't coming in. It's working on you, and you're learning all the lessons that you need to actually succeed in the future. So that reminded me of that. So thank you for sharing that too. I'd love to understand too, how do you look at the vision for the future? Because you mentioned now you have a great team that allows you to have that time to sit down and plan ahead and understand what you're trying to achieve and how to get there. How do you plan that out? What are some of the things that are coming in mind and how you're visualizing the growth of the company? And again, just tying it back to some of the challenges, you don't have to dive too much deeper into here. Is there anything that can sometimes be a hurdle or a bump in the road in looking and achieving those visions as well for the growth of the company?
Yeah, I think one of the things I struggled with was like setting KPIs because we're so mission driven, right? Like we have
Mhm.
a real connection to our customer base, and I'm very active in
Mhm.
advocacy here in the state of California because I'm on the board of two local
Mhm.
pharmacy association chapters. I'm on the policy committee for the California Pharmacists Association. I was elected delegate for the American Pharmacists Association, and like I dispel to the team that like advocacy, not just for our industry, but for each other and for our customers and for the team members is super important. And
Mhm.
so one of the challenges of kind of, I think, setting goals and then setting measurements is KPIs feel very cold and disconnected. And so I did spend a lot of time learning about OKRs. And
Mhm.
I want to share that with the audience that if you just can't sit there and like get excited about
Please.
KPIs, I highly recommend like doing some research on setting OKRs instead, so objectives and key results. So we set like a high level objective for the company, and then each department has their own objectives, teams, and then individuals. And a lot of those objectives are kind of cross reliant. And so it forces the
Hmm.
team members to rely on each other for help, but also to contribute help to other team members. And I think that
Hmm.
was like setting this OKRs. It is very intensive. It's something that we do every quarter. It takes a lot of time and thought, and then strategizing like what are the key results? What's really important that we need to be focusing on? And there's a lot, right? There's a lot I think founders always really want to pursue, making sure that you're not necessarily going after shiny things, but understanding like, does this tie into the OKRs? And that's kind of that goes
Hmm.
into the decision making process for what we work on and what we decide to kind of put into the backlog.
That's awesome because in a way, and tell me if you agree with this, in a way, the KPIs can sometimes just seem very surface level, just very number driven, just like do this thing. But then the OKR is like, hey, there's this aligned objective, this aligned mission that we're all in the same journey towards. And each of us are going to be taking different avenues to get there. But this is the aligned purpose, the destination that we're trying to get to. And that creates purpose and intentionality behind the actions as opposed to just hit those numbers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's a lot, again, going back to company culture, it's not me telling you what to do. It's me
Mm-hmm.
sharing like why we need to do this. And a lot of
Hmm.
like helping them understand my decision making process. So if there
Hmm.
are times where tough decisions need to be made, they will understand what led to that, what factors we had control over, and what factors we may not have had control over. And then it's
Hmm.
always about micro adjustments, right? Like, are we on track to hit
Yeah.
those things? And if not, like what can we identify and adjust today instead of waiting for the metrics that we need to put out, every quarter, every year.
Mm, amazing. Thank you for sharing that as well. I'd love to ask a question, Amantha, that I've been asking almost everyone that comes on the podcast, except for maybe out of the 150 something guests, maybe five or so I haven't asked this question. So you will be a victim of this as well. So here it is. Let's say you had a magic wand. You could just wave this amazing, phenomenal wand and solve just one challenge, one obstacle in the company that would allow you to hit all your client acquisition goals, your revenue goals, all the targets that you have set for yourself. I know that sometimes in business we have a million different priorities, so many fires that we sometimes need to put out, all these things that we want to focus on. But you just wave this wand, you can solve just one thing. What's the one thing you'd like to solve?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, I think if I was going to solve one thing, it's hard because AI, like we use a lot of internal AI tools, and I feel like it solved a lot of the problems. Um, I would say this is probably a weird one. We're all remote. It's very expensive to have a fully on-site team, and it would just, I think, be really nice if I had a magic wand where we had like free on-sites every quarter. I don't know if that's like the kind of answer you were looking for, but I'm planning our next our first team meeting with everyone getting together in the next few months. I was working on that last
Awesome.
night. Top of mind.
No, that's really, really cool. It's your answer, so there's no right or wrong. Thank you for sharing that as well. And it's interesting. It's interesting because I've spoken with a gentleman. His company was, I think, was doing around like 26 or 27 million, and he mentioned that there's the remote aspect, which is phenomenal, and everybody like there's so many opportunities and so many high leverage points because of it. But sometimes nothing beats the in person. He's like, hey, like sometimes my team will book things on their own and they'll go and like do a mastermind, you can call it, of 5-10 people and do their own thing and come back to me with something phenomenal. And he's like, where'd you guys do that? He's like, yeah, we just got together. And he's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Right. So there is that in person thing that can never be, I wouldn't say never, but it's hard to achieve in that remote aspect. So I like your answer as well. And actually, something popped into my head, which is maybe a question that I should have asked you when you were speaking about this earlier. But with facts, like it still surprises me that that's what you guys are doing. But is there ever like maybe a worry or a concern that will no longer be an option or an opportunity for you guys to leverage, given the how technology is advancing and all these things? Or how are you thinking about that?
I think being in healthcare, you know, people always talk about disruption in
Right.
VC. Healthcare can there's a lot of strides to be made by making things just even slightly more efficient. Like it doesn't need to have like a wrench thrown in it and blown up. And fax communications just tend to be really efficient and cost
Mm,
effective. And in a weird way, because it's so antiquated, it is actually really secure. It is difficult to hack the
mm,
fax line, whereas like emails are being hacked every single day.
Very interesting. I didn't think about that. But thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
But I
That's a
did
good.
have to explain. So, like I do have to explain to some like younger VC people like what fax marketing is, what faxes are. It is fun to hear people trying to explain what they think a fax machine does.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, it's funny. It's funny. Yeah,
yeah,
I would say the majority, and man, I might be totally wrong here, but I would say every person that's like 20 years old or younger has no idea what a fax is. So that might be an interesting situation. But thank you for sharing that as well. Amanda,
but
I have one final. Go
our
ahead.
industry is actually really old school. So like faxes,
Yes, yes, yes,
direct mailers, and publications. So we'll be in the
yes.
RX Insider publication coming out, I think, in September.
Awesome. Good stuff. Amantha, I have one final question for you here. And it's actually not a question from me. It's a question from my last guest to you, and they had no idea who you were. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, this is
Here
gonna
it
be fun.
is. What is the biggest mistake you've learned the most from?
Not setting expectations at the beginning of anything um, makes for very uncomfortable conversations down the road. So whether it's a hire or a contractor, consultant, customer, right? It's just being really clear and upfront about what the expectations are on the relationship, even with investors. What
Mm-hmm.
you expect from me, what I expect from
Mm-hmm.
you, and just having that conversation as early as possible.
Interesting. And how have you learned to have that conversation?
Um, it's just putting it out there. It's just I do talk a lot to my team about communication styles, and I am a very transparent person, and so you just preface it and just say, "Look, this might be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's worth saying now instead of making any assumptions, especially as a
Mm,
remote team that's constantly communicating on Slack. Every once in a while, I point out." Like if my answers are short, it's not because I'm being passive aggressive. It's probably because I'm running from one meeting to the next and I saw your question and I wanted to get my answer out to you as quickly as possible because as soon as I go to my next meeting, I'm going to forget to come back and answer it. And just kind of like making those small reminders to people that like
mm,
don't overthink some of the communications that go in. But like also for our Monday team meetings, like we set the expectation because we're remote. Come with camera on. I understand there will be situations where you're not feeling well and it won't be on, but the typical expectation is we work with cameras on because that's the best way we
mm.
can get to know each other and you know be on time, be presentable.
Amazing. Amantha, thank you so much for this. This has been very, very insightful. Where should people go if they want to learn a little bit more about you and, of course, a little bit more about the company as well?
Yeah. So they can go to our website, which is rx-post.com, and they can see everything that we're working on, some amazing um, information about our team and what we offer to pharmacies on there. I'm super active on LinkedIn, less so much the other social media channels as a more elder millennial. And yeah, I'm happy.
Amazing.
Founders, if you want to reach out, if you ever need advice, happy to always give my learnings and see if it's helpful at all to you.
Amazing. I will leave everything down below here if you want to check any of that out. And if you're still listening to this conversation, you want to hear more conversations like this, please hit the subscribe button and I will see you on the next episode. Amantha, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much.